The thing is, people don't understand reserve currency. It's not as if the People's Bank of China has pallets of $100 bills stacked up in the basement. Reserve currency means a currency of denomination of securities. You have to actually consider the hidden agendas. Like, well, what's behind it and where are they going with it? And that's really where the urgency comes in. And it's basically an order that accelerates the U.S. movement towards a central bank digital currency, so-called CBDC. A central bank digital currency is not a new currency. So a central bank digital dollar is a dollar. A central bank digital euro is a euro, yen, so forth. So it's not a new currency. It's a new ledger and it's a new payment channel. That's what's changed. And it's not a cryptocurrency. This is not blockchain. The ledger, they're still working it out whether the ledger is maintained by the Treasury or the Fed. The Fed could be fiscal agent for the Treasury. Those are important details, but they're still working those things out. But basically, it's a ledger-based system, 100% digital, encrypted message traffic, and it's a dollar. So what's not to like? And so the pitch for central bank digital currency, I'll refer to the dollar, but it's the same thing around the world. The pitch is, hey, I'm in an airport, I want to buy a candy bar. And I go up and I buy the candy bar and I pay for it with a credit card. And what is the retailer? How does he or she get paid? Well, they take my receivable, right? And they sell them to somebody called a merchant acquirer. Merchant acquirers go out and they just scoop up, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of credit card receivables, and they pay the merchant. So I get the candy bar. They got paid by the merchant acquirer. What does the merchant acquirer do? They deliver them to MasterCard or Visa, and MasterCard or Visa pays them. What does MasterCard do? They ship them out to all the banks who issue the MasterCards, and the banks pay them. So from 1970 to 2010, it's a long stretch, 40 years, central banks were net sellers. It didn't mean everybody sold everything, but Switzerland's down 1,000 tons. U.S. was down 1,000 tons after losing, 8,000 tons, 11,000 tons between 1950 and 1970. It was down, down, down. 2010 was the year that central banks became net buyers. Now, it doesn't mean every central bank was buying gold. It does mean that they were selling a lot less and others were buying more. And some of the buyers are Mexico, Kazakhstan, Philippines, Vietnam. We know China's a big buyer. We don't know exactly how much. Russia was a big buyer. That is continuing. Now the new players, Iran's non-transparent, but we know they're buying gold. Turkey is buying a lot of gold. Japan had a bunch of gold all along. They never told anybody about. Literally in 1 month, their reserves went from 600 tons to 900 tons. Well, the market. You can't buy 300 tons in a month, not one country in one order. But they had it all along, but they decided to reveal it, put it on their balance sheet. So Americans don't seem to like gold. I'm not sure Canadians feel much differently or others around the world. But central banks sure do. And I think that tells you something. 5 counterparties, 5 different exchanges of value, spreads all along the way. It's clunky, expensive. And the Fed says, hey, with a central bank digital currency, Jim will have an account at the Fed, probably my bank, but same thing. A little QR code, boom. And the payment goes directly from A to B. It's like Venmo, right? With a few more zeros. So it's better, faster, cheaper. The Fed's not going to disintermediate the banks because they exist to prop up the banks. Now, something else has to happen at the same time. You got to get rid of cash, because if people don't like central bank digital currencies, and I'll give you 20 reasons not to like them in a minute, but if that's your view, you just say, I'll pay cash. I'll hand the person, $5 bill. Give me some change. So you got to get rid of cash, and Ken Rogoff, a Harvard professor, and others have been working on that for a long time. But getting rid of cash and pushing out the central bank digital currency go hand in hand. So I always say, if you want to slaughter pigs, you got to get the pigs in a chute and line them up and get them into the slaughterhouse. So you can't let them run around because they'll run away. If you want to slaughter sabers, you got to get them into this digital chute, into the digital slaughterhouse. But they're working on that. So now, where are we? We're in a world where there is no more cash. Maybe you have a credit card, but all the payment channels are through the central bank digital currency. What's the difference? The difference is the Fed or Treasury, again, probably the FBI, they can see what you're doing. Now, the other thing is the digital currency, the CBDC, is programmable. Well, executive orders, or for that matter, legislation, I could say you have to read the fine print, and you do, but you have to actually consider the hidden agendas. Like, well, I can read it. Anyone can read it. It's a public document, but what's behind it and where are they going with it? And that's really where the urgency comes in. It's basically an order that accelerates the U.S. movement towards a central bank digital currency, so-called CBDC.
Believe it or not, the Bahamas has a digital currency. There are a few other countries that have already gone in that direction. Europe is, the European Central Bank is very far along. The U.S. and the Federal Reserve, because they print the currency. But all of a sudden they accelerated it. And, they said, no, we got to move fast on this and we got to catch up. And that's what 14067 was about.
It took 30 years for sterling to be run off the road. It started in 1914 and with World War I was completed in 1944 with Bretton Woods. So that the dollar did displace sterling, but it took 30 years. The thing is, people don't understand reserve currency. It's not as if the People's Bank of China has pallets of $100 bills stacked up in the basement. Reserve currency means a currency of denomination of securities. So what China does have are treasury bills and treasury notes. So the key to being reserve currency is not the currency, it's the bond market. Do you have a large, safe, liquid bond market? And if you do, then people will buy those bonds. What else are they going to do with the money? But that's much harder to replicate.
The American Silver Eagle 1 ounce worth about $20. The quarter ounce gold eagle worth about $500. Those are really practical forms of what we call in Philadelphia walking around money. I mean, you can actually spend those. Yeah, you can walk around with it and you can buy stuff. But my point is they're not digital. So they have to not only push the digital currency agenda, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they have to get rid of cash, because as long as you have cash, you can do an end run around this. So these two things are coming down the track pretty fast. Now, flipping back to the central bank digital currency, it's not a cryptocurrency. It's not on a blockchain. A blockchain is just a ledger. They've been around since the 80s, no big deal. But this ledger will be maintained by somebody, probably the Federal Reserve. But, there could be a new government agency doing it.
The standard definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP. There are a few more bells and whistles having to do with unemployment and a few other things, but that's the rule of thumb. So based on that, and based on the best available estimate for a second quarter, likely to be accurate, we're in a recession today. Now, it's not severe, but that's like saying I'm in bed with pneumonia, but I'm not dying. Well, okay, but we're in a recession right now. And there's a lot of whistling past the graveyard. I mean, the stock market is still, greatly overpriced. There's still, the buy the dips mentality hasn't gone away. It's still there. You got people like Jim Cramer yelling, buy Netflix or whatever. And, there's institutional support. There's momentum trading. Of course, 95% of the trading is by robots. So you got to reverse engineer the 27-year-olds from Bangladesh who don't get out much. They're the ones really writing these algorithms. Brilliant engineers, but, you'd have to show them around Wall Street. So all that's going on. So we haven't really seen the market collapse, stock market collapse that I would expect in association with a severe recession has not happened yet. This is just going to play out. It'll get worse as the year goes on.
Well, first of all, just a little bit of background on central bank digital currencies. It's still the dollar, so a digital dollar is still a dollar. A digital Chinese yuan is still a yuan. A digital euro is still a euro. So it's not a new currency, but it is a new payment channel, and it is a new form of the currency, if you want to think of it that way, even though it's still the dollar, the central bank digital currency, what the hidden agenda is behind that. But as I go through the list of really bad things that can happen, you say, well, okay, but I still got cash. I can go down to the bank and get whatever, $10,000 or $100,000 in cash. By the way, that's not easy to do. So they have to not only push the digital currency agenda, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they have to get rid of cash, because as long as you have cash, you can do an end run around this. So these two things are coming down the track pretty fast. Now,
the dollar as a reserve currency will not be deposed overnight, but as a payment currency, there's a difference between a reserve currency and a payment currency.
Right.
Anything can be a payment currency. If I want to pay you with baseball cards and bottle caps and you're okay with that, then it's a currency. So when we see the BRICS Plus, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, OPEC Plus, China individually, all these countries are the Eurasian European Economic Union, which is Putin's answer to the EU. All of these organizations are working on new payment systems right now, and they're going to start to roll them out this year and later. So that's going to be a radical change in how we pay for things.